Something less conspicuous, ground-mounted panels in the back behind your fence, as an example. My yard opens up on the north. They'd be useless there. That's your tech problem to solve, not ours. His friendly mask slipped bit. The point. The point is the roof panels come down one way or another, or what we've stepped forward. I have written approval right here. I showed them the form with Richard's signature. They broke my window and are stealing my property. We're removing a violation. Diane corrected. The covenant gives us this authority. Does it give you authority to break? Windows 1 officer asks. That was an accident, Richard said quickly. The second officer, older, with gray at his temples, surveyed the scene. I've seen this before. Chai disputes can get messy. He turned to Richard. Sir, regardless of your covenant, you can't damage property or enter someone's land. If they've explicitly denied permission, our legal counsel says differently. Then your legal counsel can explain that to a judge. The officer turned to the workers. You need to stop what you're doing and leave this property immediately. The men looked to Richard, who nodded reluctantly. This isn't over, Diane muttered as they retreated. Actually, it is, I replied, pulling an envelope from my bather pocket. I grabbed it on my way out, just in case. Richard Thompson and Diane Mercer, as lead investigator for the State Energy Commission, I'm serving you with official notice that Pinecrest Gardens HOA is under investigation for illegal prevention of renewable energy installations. Their faces went pale. Richard reached for the envelope with a trembling hand. Oh. What? Diane sputtered. The investigator assigned to your case. I couldn't help smiling. Have been for 2 days. Richard's eyes narrowed. This is a conflict of interest, not at all. I disclosed my residence to my superiors immediately. They felt my first-hand experience would be valuable to the investigation. I gestured to the workers loading my damaged panels into their truck. And you've just provided excellent evidence. The older police officer cleared his throat. Sir, do you want to press charges for the broken window and property damage? Absolutely, I replied, not taking my eyes off Richard and Diane, and I need a copy of the police report for my official investigation file. Neighbors had gathered in a loose semicircle, whispering among themselves. You planned this, Richard accused. Installed those panels, knowing we'd object just to trap us. I installed them because I care about renewable energy and reducing my carbon footprint, I corrected. Your illegal response is entirely your own doing. Diane's face hardened. The board will fight this. We have powerful friends. I'm counting on it. I replied, the governor is particularly interested in HOA that think they're above state law. As the police took statements, Marcus sidled up beside me. State investigator, huh? You've been holding out on me professional discretion, I explained. But now that it's public, I lowered my voice. How many other neighbors have been denied permission for solar or other renewable energy? He thought for a moment. At least 7 that I know of. Eleanor on Oak Drive wanted wind turbines. The Jacksons tried for solar last year. The Patels asked about geothermal heating. I'll need to speak with all of them. Marcus grinned. I think they'll be very interested in speaking with you too. Across the lawn, Richard was on his phone, pacing and gesturing angrily. Diane huddled with a small group of residents who'd always supported the board's strictest policies. The officer returned my copy of the police report. We'll need you to come down to the station later to make a formal statement. Of course, I watched as Richard ended his call. His face grim. Do you happen to know a good window repair company? My brother-in-law runs one. I can give you his card. As I thanked him, a sleek black car pulled up. A woman in a sharp business suit emerged, marching straight to Richard and Diane. Even from a distance, I could see their relief at her arrival. Who's that? I asked Marcus. Heather Donovan, their lawyer. He frowned. She's ruthless, shut down every attempt to challenge the HOA for years. Heather's gaze locked on me. She whispered something to Richard, who pointed at me and nodded. This just got more complicated, I murmured. Are you worried? Marcus asked. I watched as Heather strode toward us, briefcase swinging. No, I've got something they don't. What's that? My phone buzzed with a text from my boss, Governor, requesting update on Pinecrest Gardens investigation. Media showing interest. I smiled, the law on my side. My heart pounded like a drum as I pushed open the doors to the community center. Every head turned my way. Some neighbors whispered behind their hands, others glared openly. Richard Thompson froze mid-sentence at the podium, his mouth hanging open as I walked in, wearing my official State Energy Commission jacket as I was saying. Richard quickly recovered. This troublemaker has violated our... I slapped my government badge and ID on the table. The loud smack echoed through the study. Official capacity as lead investigator for the State Energy Commission. I announced, my voice steady, despite my racing pulse. Yesterday, you illegally trespassed on my property and stole $1,000 worth of legally installed solar equipment. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I spotted Diane shrinking into her seat, her earlier smugness replaced by wide-eyed panic. That's absurd," Richard stammered, loosening his tie. "We were simply enforcing our rules about rules that violate state law." I cut in, connecting my laptop to the projector. The screen filled with Section 714 of the State Energy Protection Act. This clearly states that HOAs cannot prohibit or arrest RCT homeowners from installing solar energy systems. A bead of sweat trickled down Richard's temple. "We didn't know you worked for the government. Would that have made a difference? Would you have followed the law if you knew I could fight back?" No answer. I clicked to my next slide. For 8 months, my office has tracked 12 separate complaints from Pinecrest Gardens residents, each time you cited aesthetic concerns to block solar installations. Mrs. Jenkins, a quiet widow from Oak Lane, suddenly stood up. "They denied mine last spring, said it would hurt property values." Others joined in a chorus of frustrated voices sharing similar stories. Richard banged his gavel furiously. "Order, this is not an open forum." I pulled out my phone and played the recording from yesterday. Deanne's voice filled the room. "The board voted unanimously. Those eyesore violated our aesthetic guidelines." Diane jumped to her feet. "He tricked us. This whole thing was a setup." "I've lived here for 3 years," I replied calmly. "I didn't ask for this assignment, but when my own HOA broke the law, stole my property, and then bragged about it, well, let's just say this investigation became personal." Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You have no right to record private conversations. Actually, our state has one-party consent laws for recording more laws. You should have checked before breaking into my property." I projected photos of my empty roof, the damage to my lawn from their trucks, and a clear shot of my panels stacked in Diane's garage, courtesy of Marcus, who had documented everything. "Let me be perfectly clear," I continued. "This isn't just about my solar panels anymore. This is about systematic abuse of power that ends today." The community center doors suddenly burst open again. A tall woman in a crisp suit strode in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Catherine Reynolds, County Property Inspector," she announced, dropping a thick folder on the table. "Beside me, based on multiple reports and evidence gathered over the past year, I'm serving official notice that all HOA board operations are suspended, effective immediately pending full investigation." One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson and M. Mercer will need statements from both of you regarding the removal of private property." Richard's gavel slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor as chaos erupted around us. "You can't do this," Diane shrieked, backing away from the officer. "We run this neighborhood." Catherine fixed her with a cool stare. "Not anymore." I hadn't expected county involvement so quickly. My investigation had apparently intersected with Catherine's broader probe into HOA violations, as the officers escorted a protesting Richard and Diane to separate corners for questioning. Catherine whispered to me, "This goes deeper than solar panels we found. Financial irregularities in their records dating back 3 years. How bad, I asked. Missing funds, suspicious contracts, unexplained payments. Your solar panel situation just gave us the opening we needed." A hand touched my shoulder. I turned to find Mrs. Jenkins, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "My late husband wanted those panels. Our electric bills are killing me on my fixed income." One by one, other neighbors approached, sharing their stories. Eco-friendly, landscaping denied, harassment over minor infractions, selective enforcement of rules. Marcus pushed through the crowd with his phone out. "You need to see this," he said urgently. "I've been documenting board meetings for months. Look what I recorded last week. Depressed play on screen. Richard and Diane huddled with a man in an expensive suit. Don't worry about legal pushback. The man said, my company can't afford to lose customers to Home Solar. Keep blocking those installations and we'll make sure your consulting fees continue. I looked up sharply. Who is that CEO of Sunshine Electric? Marcus replied, our regional power company. As realization dawned, I felt the investigation expanding far beyond what I'd imagined. This wasn't just an HOA breaking the law. This was corporate corruption. Catherine viewed the video, her expression hardening. We need to bring in the state attorney general. This crosses multiple jurisdictions now outside the community center. Windows News. Fans were already arriving. Someone had tipped off the media. What happens now? I asked Catherine. Now she smiled grimly. Now we follow the money. The dispatcher wearily 6 days had passed since the explosive HOA meeting. 6 days of escalating her harassment. First came the threatening notes under my door. Then my mailbox was smashed. Yesterday, someone had slashed my car tires after giving my statement to the responding officers. I couldn't go back to sleep. I brewed coffee and reviewed the case files. Spreading across my dining table, the investigation had mushroomed. Beyond Pinecrest Gardens to 5 other HOAs in the county, all with suspicious patterns of solar denial, all with financial ties to Sunshine Electric. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Check your email. Sent something important. The attachment was a scanned letter addressed to all Pinecrest residents except me. Emergency notice: your property values are under attack by government overreach. Emergency meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Richards's house, come defend your community. I forwarded it to Catherine with a quick note. They're rallying support. Her reply came, instantly already on it. Stay home tonight, don't engage, easier said than done by noon. Neighbors I known for years crossed the street to avoid me. The friendly wave from the mail carrier was replaced with a hesitant nod. I'd become a pariah in my own neighborhood. I was documenting the paint vandalism when a black SUV with tinted windows cruised slowly past my house for the 3rd time. The hair on my neck stood up. This felt different from neighborhood hostility, more professional, more threatening. My desk phone rang. My supervisor at the State Energy Commission. We've received a formal complaint against you, she said without preamble. Allegations of harassment, unprofessional conduct, and conflict of interest. That's ridiculous. I'm the victim here. I know that, she said quietly, but Richard Thompson's brother-in-law is State Senator Montgomery. There's pressure coming from above to reassign you. My stomach dropped. They're trying to derail the investigation. Exactly. I'm fighting it, but you need to be extremely careful. Document everything by the book, understood? I barely had time to process this when my doorbell rang through the peephole. I saw Diane standing on my porch, alone, looking uncharacteristically disheveled against my better judgment. I opened the door, keeping the security chain latched. What do you want? Her usual arrogance was gone. They're going to pin it all on me, she said, voice trembling. Richard and the others. They're setting me up to take the fall. Why tell me I'm the enemy, remember? Because I kept records. Her eyes darted nervously to the street. Every meeting, every decision, every payment. I'm not going down alone. Before I could respond, a car horn blared. Richard sat in his Mercedes at the curb, staring daggers at us. I shouldn't be here, Diane whispered. Tonight's meeting. They're planning something big. Not just against you, anyone who supports solar. She hurried away, climbing into Richard's car. Their heated argument was visible even through the closed windows. I immediately called Catherine. Could be a trap, she warned. Or she's looking to cut a deal. Either way, we need those records. As twilight fell, cars began filling Richard's circular driveway from my window. I counted over 40 neighbors, far more than attended regular HOA meetings. My phone pinged with messages from the few allies I had left in the neighborhood. They're talking about a class action lawsuit against you personally. Richard says he has proof. You falsified evidence. They're collecting $500 from each household for legal fees. The mounting pressure felt suffocating. Everything I'd worked for was at risk. My job, my home, my reputation. A gentle knock at my back door startled me. Mrs. Jenkins stood there with Marcus and 3 other neighbors I recognized from the meeting. May we come in? Mrs. Jenkins asked. Not everyone believes their lies. Over tea at my kitchen table, a surprising counter-resistance formed. Marcus had been tracking the HOA's financial records for months. Mrs. Jenkins had documentation of selective enforcement. Others shared stories of intimidation when they challenged board decisions. We need to fight back. Marcus insisted not just about solar panels anymore. This is about community bullying, a text from Catherine interrupted us. Turn on Channel 7 News. Now we crowded around my TV as the anchor reported. Breaking news tonight as the state attorney general announces an expanded investigation into alleged corruption between multiple HOA and Sunshine Electric. Anonymous whistleblowers claim the power company paid HOA board members to block residential solar installations. The report cut to hidden camera footage of Richard meeting with Sunshine Electric executives, discussing problem homeowners and consulting fees for each denied solar application. My phone exploded with notifications. Catherine Diane came through, turned over everything. Mrs. Jenkins squeezed my hand as we watched Rich's face filled the screen, caught in the harsh glare of news cameras outside his house, the planned meeting against me, disintegrating as reporters screen Sunshine Electric files for emergency injunction against State Energy Commission investigation. Catherine called seconds later. They're playing hardball, got their corporate lawyers claiming unlawful targeting of a public utility. They're demanding all our evidence and witness statements. Can they do that? They've got friends in high places. Judge Harrison granted a temporary restraining order. We have 48 hours to show cause or surrender our files. A loud commotion outside drew us to the window. A process server stood on my porch, papers in hand, while a news crew filmed from the sidewalk. What now? Mrs. Jenkins asked, fear evident in her voice. The doorbell rang insistently through the peephole. I could see the server impatient face now. I said, squaring my shoulders, we show them what happens when they mess with the wrong homeowner. I opened the door as cameras flashed, accepting the thick legal document with steady hands. The fight had only just begun, and it was about to get much bigger than my missing solar panels. Look at this. Eleanor's hands shook as she played the first recording on her tablet. My jaw dropped as Richard's voice filled my living room. Deny first, never negotiate. I slouched forward, barely able to believe my ears. You recorded all of their meetings. Eleanor nodded, her eyes shining with purpose. For 2 years. They thought no one would ever challenge them. We sat till 2 a.m. in the morning, watching hundreds of videos, the HOA going after families. They disapproved of Diane taunting homeowners behind their backs, but the worst was from a meeting 6 months prior. These solar panel requests are running wild. Richard complained to the board. I've spoken to my friends at Sunshine Electric. They're losing clients to these home systems. If we close down installations in our community, they'll give us all a kickback. My heart raced. This is bribery, actual criminal bribery. I phoned Catherine immediately despite the late evening. I have proof not only of them breaking solar laws, but of morning corruption. Catherine arrived with 2 officers and a laptop. We posted Eleanor's videos, the officers taking studious notes. This is all about a switch. Catherine said, her professional calm slipping to register real shock. This isn't about your solar panels and me anymore. My phone buzzed with text messages from neighbors. Diane was informing everyone I had invited government bullies to harass the community. I demonstrated to Catherine. They're desperate, she said, typing rapidly on her phone, and they should be 3 hours later as I made coffee. Police cars arrived outside Richard's house via my kitchen window. I watched officers escort him to a patrol car across the street. The same scene was acted out at Diane's. My doorbell rang incessantly as neighbors gathered, buzzing with queries. Richard and Diane have been detained for interrogation on corruption and commercial bribery. I described standing on my porch. They took kickbacks to decline our solar panels. Marcus elbowed his way through the crowd. Is that why they declined my solar application last year, and my energy efficient? Windows someone else. Soon 30 neighbors blanketed my front yard, sharing stories of denials, fines and harassment. Someone had pizza ordered. Others had folding chairs. What started in confusion became a community, awakening to finally standing up to those tyrants. Marcus raised his soda can in a toast as sunset painted the sky. A black SUV slammed to a stop at the curb. A man in an expensive suit strode up my sidewalk past the crowd. "Are you the owner?" he growled. Clothes stuffing an envelope into my hand, I nodded, unzipping it as neighbors stopped talking. "This is a cease and desist order from Parkview Legal on behalf of Sunshine Electric." I read slowly. "They're requesting I withdraw all claims, sign a non-disclosure agreement, or face horrible legal consequences." Gasps circulated through the crowd. I stalled for a moment. This was a large company with expensive lawyers. They think that they can scare us into quiet. I answered, my voice steadier than I was feeling no longer. Eleanor continued on, tablet in hand. "I have video of Sunshine Electric executives meeting with Richard in his backyard, discussing exactly how to close down solar facilities." The suited man's face went white. Neighbors stood up their phones, recording his expression. "This is harassment," he stuttered, backing away from his SUV as dozens of cameras followed him behind. "He'll be hearing from our legal team," as his car sped away. Marcus grasped my shoulder. "What now?" Before I could answer, phones rang out throughout the crowd with the same news alert. A neighbor read it out. "Breaking State Attorney General announces sweeping investigation into HOA corruption and utility company collusion around 3 counties." We were all there, frozen and silent, as the implications sank in. This was not just our little neighborhood. How many had gone through the same rottenness? Eleanor's grip on my arm was so tight, her words barely above a whisper. "They're coming back up the street." Men in black suits emerged from the SUVs. My neighbors formed a protective cordon. Phones recording. Every moment the front man raised his hands. "We're not threatening anyone. I'm James Wilson, Sunshine Electric's new chief counsel. More threats." James shifted uncomfortably with cameras focused on him. The CEO had sent me to extend an offer of a settlement before it goes further. That night, I couldn't sleep. The offer of settlement sat on my kitchen table. New solar panels for me, cash for the community, and a concession of wrongdoing if I would execute a partial confidentiality agreement. I called Catherine at dawn. "Can trust them?" "No," she said bluntly. "But I've spoken to the Attorney General, accept their initial overture. But we're still looking into this. It goes beyond your community." 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Richard and Diane were confined to house arrest with ankle bracelets. Sunshine Electric installed premium solar panels on my roof at no charge. News vans came and went as our saga made the front page. HOA corruption exposed. Homeowner turns the tables on board. I received hundreds of emails from all over the state, describing similar HOA abuses. I forwarded each one to Catherine, who put them in the growing question on a cold Saturday morning. Workers put up my garden fence, yet another piece of the settlement I directed, while sipping coffee. When a vehicle that I didn't know drove over by the street, a woman came out, appearing upset. "Are you the solar panel man from the new news?" I warily nodded. "I'm Laura Thompson, Richard's wife." She glanced about, clutching her purse. "Can we whisper to each other in my kitchen?" Laura's hands trembled as she pulled out a flash drive. Richard kept records of every HOA in the county, working with Sunshine Electric, names, dates, payment amounts. He called it his insurance policy. "Why are you giving me this?" asked, tears fill her eyes. They promised to reduce Richard's charges if he testified against bigger players. But yesterday, Sunshine Electric's lawyers told him they'd make sure he took all the blame. The flash drive contained spreadsheets, emails, and meeting notes detailing a 5-year scheme across 26 neighborhoods. I called Catherine immediately. 2 months later, I stood in the community center as our neighborhood elected a completely new HOA board. Eleanor became president with Marcus as treasurer. Their first act, passing new bylaws protecting homeowners' rights to renewable energy. I spotted a moving truck outside Diane's house. As I drove home, her husband loaded boxes while she directed him, occasionally glaring at the new solar panels, now visible on 5 houses on our street. Catherine's car pulled into my driveway as I arrived home. "Quite a view," she remarked, looking at my gleaming solar array. "The panels or Diane leaving?" "Both," she laughed, handing me an official envelope. Inside was a letter from the governor's office offering me a position heading a new task force on HOA reform. "They want you to do statewide what you did here. Protect homeowners from corrupt boards." The case had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. Sunshine Electric's CEO resigned in disgrace. 3 county commissioners were under investigation. Richard and Diane faced criminal charges for bribery and fraud. That evening, neighbors gathered in my backyard for a celebration. Children played on swing sets that once violated HOA rules. Gardens bloomed with native plants instead of the required ornamentals from the old guidelines. I never planned any of this. I told Marcus as we watched the sunset, I just wanted to lower my electric bill. Sometimes the small battles lead to the biggest victories, he replied. As darkness fell, Eleanor waved everyone's attention to her tablet. Breaking news, she announced the screen showed Sunshine Electric's headquarters with FBI agents, leading executives out in handcuffs. Cheers erupted around me. A reporter on screen said sources say evidence provided by a homeowner led to today's raid's speech. Someone called suddenly. Everyone looked at me. I stood uncomfortable with the attention. I'm not special. I just refused to back down when they took my solar panels. That's exactly why we need you, Eleanor said, holding up a clipboard. The governor's task force is just the beginning. People across the state are asking for your help. I looked at my neighbors, people who barely spoke to each other months ago, now united against corruption. My phone buzzed with yet another message from a homeowner in another city facing similar battles. I started this just wanting clean energy for my home. I said, taking the clipboard now, I'm fighting for every homeowner's right to choose. Marcus raised his glass to the power of one person standing up as everyone cheered. I glimpsed Diane watching from her half-empty house across the street, her face twisted with anger as her influence crumbled before her eyes.